Mr. Wong studied economics and East Asian studies at the University of Chicago and Yale University. He has worked with some of the world's biggest banks, including UBS and RBS, before he joined our Hong Kong Foundation, where he is now Deputy Executive Director. He's also Chairman of the Clean Air Network. Before I invite Stephen, could I just please remind you to switch off your mobile phones if you could. The format of today will be Mr. Wong will give a presentation, and afterwards we'll open it up to the floor for a discussion. So thank you all, and Mr. Wong, welcome.
Thank you. I have 50 slides, and but I think these are important numbers. I think I want to just give you a background of, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you, where the housing price will be in the next year or so. But what I can tell you, though, is some of the basic analysis that we can, how the framework of sort of thinking about this. So obviously, the black line in Hong Kong is Hong Kong property price. So that's Hong Kong is number one. Unfortunately, since 2005, in terms of the price increase compared to all the other big cities in the world, not even London. For those who are from London, from UK, you know how much London has risen in terms of prices, but Hong Kong beat them. And if you look at Hong Kong and Singapore specifically, Hong Kong since 2009 also has risen a lot compared to Singapore, which is basically flat. And in terms of the housing price to income ratio, Hong Kong is a lot higher. And obviously, we also spend a bit more expenditure in terms of on our housing as well. I think this graph is important because how does the housing price affect us? In terms of real wage increase, we have increased from 2004 to now our real wage increase is about 9%, from 100 to 109. So that's the index, which is lower than our real GDP growth. Compared to 2004, our GDP has grown by 50%, which is not bad, but which is actually higher than the wages. But what is important, though, is obviously our real property price is increased by 266%. So it's a lot higher than the GDP or the wages. So if you actually just earn a wage, you are sort of lagging behind the overall GDP growth. The overall GDP growth will be lagging behind the property price increase. And that is obviously the root of a lot of our socio-economic problems. And even if you're not buying, even if you're just renting the place, the red line is the wage index. The blue line is the rental increase. The rental increase, obviously, is still a lot higher than the wage increase. So regardless of whether you're buying or renting, you are suffering unless you, obviously unless you're a landlord. And as a result, home ownership rate has decreased quite a bit since 2006. And also as a result of this, we would argue that the middle class is shrinking. So I'm not going to go into the detailed definition of what do you mean by middle class. All we know is that it's not the median, right? The middle is 50%, but if you just earn 50% of the population income, you're not middle class because we sort of define the top 25% as really the middle class because that's where they can really sort of afford the houses, in the private market. So these are sort of by looking at how can you save money, how can you afford. We can calculate if you earn sort of 50,000 household income, what sort of home that you can probably afford. Now 50,000 Hong Kong dollars per month household income, that already is sort of the top 20% of the population. Right? So the rest of the 80% of the household are earning less than 50,000 Hong Kong dollars per month or less. So you can imagine if you are earning less than 50,000 Hong Kong dollars as a household, both the husband and wife working, you probably cannot afford a private house. So in other words, 80% of the Hong Kong people, 80% of the household will probably cannot afford a private houses in Hong Kong. Now, So I described the phenomenon, and I would sort of go into a bit more analysis. Usually, I look at the property price by looking at two different factors. One is the fundamental factors, and one is what I call a technical factors. This is important, right? Because thinking about when you buy a stock market, when you look at the stock prices, they also have fundamental and technical factors. For example, Warren Buffett will look at the fundamental factors. For example, the earnings of a company, right? Now, it's the same in the housing market. Fundamental factors are obviously demographic changes, birth, death, immigration rate, marriages, and divorce. And the technical factors will include the capital flows, foreign investment, interest rate, monetary policy, quantitative easing, etc., and etc. Now, I would spend quite a bit of time talking about the fundamental factors, but one thing I want to leave it with you is that even if you have a very strong fundamental, a bit like a company that have huge earnings like Facebook, if there is a stock crash, i.e. technical factor, a very good company, the stock price can drop by 50%. You see what I'm saying? So fundamental reason is not the only reason that determines the prices. However, to look at technical factors is a lot harder, right? Because even Warren Buffett would say that he has no clue of where the stock market will be tomorrow, right? So because looking at a lot of these technical factors has to do with where the capital flows, and that is very difficult to analyze. But let me just talk about the technical first. Technical include, for example, the monetary policy, which is one of them is manifested is in the negative interest rate that we have. So the red bar, the real interest rate has been negative, which means the nominal interest rate is basically lower than the inflation rate. And that's why we have negative interest rate. And we know that negative interest rate leads to higher price. And more importantly, since 2008, Hong Kong has a linked currency regime, right? So we peg to the dollars, which also means that we can incorporate their monetary policies. So therefore, when they do QEs, we basically similarly affected. So this graph shows you the monetary base has expanded tremendously since 2008. And specifically, you can see this is QE1, right? 2009, QE1, and that's the huge jump. QE2, QE3, and then when they stop QE, it's basically plateau. So QEs and all this money printing obviously has affected Hong Kong in the sense that there's a huge expansion in monetary base because of capital inflow. And do we know, is these capital inflow going to stay in Hong Kong forever? We don't know. Maybe not. Maybe they will be. If they are not, if they flow out again, obviously that would affect our asset prices. Because these monetary inflow has also affected our credit cycle as well. Obviously, Hong Kong Monetary Authority has done a lot to stabilize the household debt for residential, the general sort of the general household. But you can see, I think this is actually the mortgages. The pink one is actually the residential mortgages. It actually stabilizes. But you can see that the private purposes, loans for other purposes, has gone up as well. So you can see that the overall household debt to the percentage of GDP has gone up, and sort of that indicate the credit cycle has been obviously going up as a result of the capital inflow. And as a result of these, people say that, well, that's why a lot of people have paid off their mortgages, right? Because the price has gone up, and it's easy to pay off their mortgage these days. So a lot of the home owner, occupier without mortgage, the percentage has gone up a lot. So this excludes those who buy for rent. This only include those buy and live. Those who have no mortgages actually now constitute 65% of all the houses in Hong Kong, which is quite high, actually. And now, I have described the technical factors, which we can go back and discuss a bit more, because it's monetary policies, it's finance, economics, it's interesting credit cycle. These are interesting topics. But I thought what is more interesting, though, is the fundamental factors, because I think not a lot of us can control the technical factors. But I think we can think more about the fundamental factors, which is more in our control. Now, I think all of you know that in Hong Kong, we only have 24% of land that is used to develop, including living and doing business and roads and stuff like that. So the remaining 3/4, 75% are basically green areas, including 40% of the country park. Now that is compared to Singapore. 73% in Singapore are all developed lands. So if you just look at these numbers, you will understand why we have, we have higher density compared to the rest of the world, and then we're living smaller. So in Hong Kong, per capita living space is about 170 square feet, and I'm sure all of you guys live bigger than this, but that's sort of the average of Hong Kong, which is about 60% less than Singapore, 60% less. Now, I want to give you a graphic visualization of what we mean when we say that we developed 24% only. The gray area are the developed areas, and the dark green areas are the country parks. So the country park is 40% of Hong Kong. The gray area is the developed lands, and then the yellow areas are the sort of the new towns that is supposed to be in the planning. The rest, the shallow green, so for example these shallow greens are not country parks. They are just there as green belt. Now, I think if I were to give you the most important lesson today, the most important message I want to share today is that we basically have stopped building new land in the past 10 years. If you look at from 1995 to 2004, we have built about 8,000 hectares of land through reclamations and building new towns. But since 2005 to 2014, we stopped, basically. We stopped. And the reason is because, well, it's the SARS, it's property housing prices drop a lot, so we are scared. Let's just stop building flats. But what the mistake what society has made was that, well, not only we stopped building flats, we decided to stop building land, which is quite a mistake, right? Because in Singapore, they can stop selling flats, building new houses, but they have land reserve that continue to build up. We don't have that in Hong Kong because we stopped doing anything for the past 10 years. And similarly, we stopped doing reclamation as well. The reclamation dropped by 90%. In the past 2 decades, we have 1,000 hectares each, but last decade we have none. Now, so therefore, I wanted to just have a mental exercise with you, is to argue that, okay, how many hectares of land we need in the next 30 years? Let me just show you this graph. Now, in the 70s and the 80s, when I grew up in Hong Kong in the 70s, and we built about 8 new towns. So Sha Tin, Tuen Mun, Tai Po, Yuen Long, Fun Ling, Shang Shui, all these are new towns built. It need planning, you need acquire lands, and you need build new towns. Now, we have some new towns in the 80s and 90s, but if I ask you, what is our latest new town? And that was Dong Chong. That was actually more than 10 years ago already. So in the 70s and 80s, we have 10 or 8 new towns. In the past 10 years, we have no new town. And my next question is, well, when is our next new town going to be in place? Well, the next new town is going to be, in completion in the next 20 to 30 years. Hong Shui Kiu, the first batch will come in about 7 years, but actually to finish the entire Hong Shui Kiu, that takes another 10 or 20 years. So you're saying that you've done no new towns completion for 30 years. And you ask me why is there a problem in Hong Kong? Of course there is a problem in Hong Kong, because we've done nothing for 30 years. And this is, I think, sort of the, sort of explain where we are at. And then my question to you then is, well, given that we have such a land, we have stopped doing anything, we have so crowded areas. For the next 30 years, how many new towns do you think we need? In other words, how many new Sha Tins equivalent new towns you think we need? Just as a ballpark number. Just as a ballpark number. So maybe 3 Sha Tin, maybe 3 equivalent size of Sha Tin of new towns that we need. If you agree with that, 1 Sha Tin is 3,000 hectares. 3 Sha Tin would be 9,000 hectares that we need. Now, 9,000 hectares, to give you a sense of perspective, we talk a lot about Wangzhou. Wangzhou, in English, I think it's Guangzhou. Guangzhou is about 30 hectares. Now, how many Guangzhou you need to fill that 9,000? Right, a lot more. And some people talk about the golf club. You know how big is the Funding Golf Club? It's about 126 hectares. So how many of Funding Golf Club you need to get to that 9,000 hectares? Right? So what I found interesting is that in these days in Hong Kong, people love talking about 1 hectare. You know, they talk about a football court, which is 1 hectare. And talk about Guangzhou is about 20 hectares, 30 hectares. What I'm saying is that, well, we don't just need a couple hundred hectares. We need a couple thousand hectares, it's not 10,000s of hectares. And that's what we've been doing in the past 30, that's what we've been doing when I grew up. And we just choose stop to do anything. And is that the right decision to make as a society? And I'm challenging that. So you probably know that we try hard to get a bit more private flats to the market these days in the past 5 years by mostly rezoning, because a lot of what we have is gone already. So the government has tried. So you can see the yellow bar. The yellow bar is the completion, right? When we talk about private flat supply, you need to actually define it, because the green bar is they actually, when they sell it, the land, that's not real supply, right? When they actually started to build it, the construction starts, it's not real supply. And then pre-sale, and then the completion. So if you just look at the completion, the yellow bar, if we have 18,000 units as the target by the government themselves, we have been short the completion for the past 5 years. And in fact, we have been short completion for the past 10 years. So if you look at the average completion of new private housing, it's about 11,000, which is every year we are short 7,000. And so 10 years, we are short 70,000 private flats in the past 10 years. Now, yes, the new supply will go up in the next couple of years, but these supply will be a lot smaller sizes. So the gross floor area is still quite short, actually. And we are not catching up with those who, it's a cumulative demand. We are not catching up. That's the private flats. And that is already better than the public housing. As you know, the public housing, the government supply is 28, the government target is 28,000. Even in the best case scenario, for the next 5 years, we are about 30% short for public housing. No wonder we have social problems, right? Because you're not meeting your own targets. Obviously, where is the housing come from? We need new land. But do we have new land? We don't have new town. Well, we don't have new supply because the lease modification is harder. And as I said, we don't have any reclamation. And if you look at all the new towns that we had, all of them are significantly, used as a reclaimed land. For example, Zhangguanou is the most classical example. It's the entire Zhangguanou is almost out of reclaimed land. And even Sha Tin has a high percentage of reclaimed land. And this is some of the graphs that I thought you might be interested. Tuen Mun, the green area is the reclaimed area. This is the current shoreline. These are the old shoreline, right? So the green area is the reclaimed area. So if you look at, right now, for example, if you go to Tuen Mun Center, if you go to Butterfly Estate, if you go to Tuen Mun An Ding Chun, Yao Ngoi Chun, Tuen Mun Town Hall, all these are on reclaimed land. That's in Tuen Mun. As a result, 50% of those living in Tuen Mun are living on reclaimed land. So our statement is that if there's no reclamation, there's no new town. If there's no new town, there's no new land. If there's no new land, then we have no new flats. That's very simple. So That's Tai Po. Tai Po is also 57% of the population living in reclaimed area. And all these are public housing estate, by the way. We do reclamation not because we want to build a luxurious apartment. We do reclamation because we want to build public housing. All these public housings are on reclaimed lands. And this is Chun Wan, and this is Zhangguanou. The Zhangguanou, if you've been to Zhangguanou, the 3 new MTR stations are all on reclaimed land. Hang Hao, Zhangguanou, Jiuqinglan. All these 3 new MTR stations and all the public housing surrounding the MTR stations are on reclaimed land. Therefore, they house 74% of the population. And this is Sha Tin. Sha Tin you might be more familiar with. And if you look at this is where Prince Rail was. Prince Rail Hospital, right? It's in the sea. And this is Yunzhao Gok. This is Sha Tin Dayasing, City 1. This is a race course. All these are in the sea. All these are on the reclaimed areas. And so therefore, if there's no reclamation, there are no new towns. And in fact, we are not advocating for reclamation inside the Victoria part of the harbor because it's not legal. But we just want to show that the extent of reclamation, even within Victoria Harbor. And if I were to ask you, where do you think Wan Chai, for example, was reclaimed? In Wan Chai, the exhibition center is reclaimed on reclaimed land. I'm sure you know that. Gloucester Road is on reclaimed land. You probably should know that. The southern basketball court is probably on the reclaimed land. You know that. Some people thought that the tramway was sort of the original shoreline. The answer is no. Hopewell Center was the original shoreline in Wan Chai. So in fact, it's basically on the Queen Road east. That was the original shoreline. And if we would just mark up there's a little temple there. If you go to Hopewell Center, right by Hopewell Center, there's a temple. And do you know what the temple is for? The temple is for the fishermen before they go out and they worship there. And that's where the original shoreline was. So the entire Wan Chai was a reclaimed area. And that's why we call Wan Chai. Wan means bay. Chai means little bay. Wan Chai is little bay. So every time you read, when they heard about the word Wan, Causeway Bay is a bay. Togua Wan is a bay because it's a wan. Kowloon Wan, Kowloon Bay is a bay. Saoge Wan is a wan. So you heard about Bay, Wan, all these are on reclaimed areas. The entire Hong Kong is reclaimed. So even Causeway Bay, obviously, the Victoria Park is on reclaimed areas. It's in the sea. So I was just joking. We're talking about the core value of Hong Kong. The core value of Hong Kong is to be open, be accepting, accept diversification and diversity, and build so that we can accommodate people. Build by removing the mountains and reclaiming the land, all the way starting from Kwun Tong, Chun Wan, Wan Chai, everywhere we have done that. And we have stopped in the past 10 years. And so without reclamation, you can see that a lot of our private flats are on reclaimed land. And because reclaimed land obviously give you a bigger size and bigger plot ratio and stuff like that. And this graph is important. This shows you that because we have not stopped doing anything for such a long time, therefore, our inventory is depleting. And this is to show that the reclaimed land that we have, whether in Zhangguanou, Dongchong, Tai Po, the inventory is depleting. And therefore, this shows that our reclamation pace has been lower than Singapore and Macau, obviously, lower than Singapore, Shenzhen. And some people said that, well, let's just talk about population. Let's talk about population. And, in 1945, we have about 500,000 people in Hong Kong, 500,000. Now we have 7 million. So 1945, 500,000. 1951, we have 2 million people. 1970, which is where I was born, we have 4 million people. And almost every decade, we add 1 million people to Hong Kong. And as a result, all of the Hong Kong people, most of us, are either first generation or second generation or third generation immigrants. because by definition, we were 500,000 people. So all of us are immigrants, all of us. And so you can see that, well, is the immigration pace too quick these days? And you look at this graph. Our pace as a percentage of total population has been the slowest since we have Hong Kong. So let's not just blame our sufferings, our lack of effort of building land to those who want to follow our own pathway to come to Hong Kong. Because the pace has been the lowest since Hong Kong, we ever Hong Kong. And so it's not about the immigrants, it's about what? It's obviously, you can see every year we have a lot of first marriages, immigrant marriages. Unfortunately, we have a lot of divorce as well. So all these are what we call family formation. You need a bit, another additional apartments to do that. And then you obviously have new births, you have some deaths. So just looking at the demographic events, you need a lot of apartments to do that. It's not just about immigrations. Let's just not blame those on something that we haven't achieved ourselves. And if you look at our developed land versus our population growth, our population growth is not that high. It's actually one of the lowest in Asia, but still higher than our developed land. That is our misfortune. And going forward, just so you know, if you look at your own apartments, you probably know that a couple of years from now, 50% of all of our apartments will be 50 years old or higher, which means that they need to be rebuilt at some point. And so you need a lot more new flats to take care of that. As a result, we think that we need 9,000 hectares. We need to build about 1.2 million flats. And the government is planning to have at most 5,000, which is about 1.5 Sha Tin. To us, that's 4,000 hectares short. And where we can get that 4,000 hectares, as I said, Guangzhou is only 30. So Golf Course is only 126. Where can we get that 4,000? Is the ultimate number. So we have a little bit of ideas. We thought that the yellow areas should be reclaimed. These are all outside Victoria Harbour, by the way. And so, for example, the government is planning to have this, what they call the metropolis, which is the island, the reclaimed island between Lantau and Hong Kong Island, which we thought should be done quicker. But that would not be enough, because that's still short of the 4,000. We need this, which is the what we call the south of Changzhou, and then some other bit more reclaimed area in the Zhangguanou and Tuen Mun. But one thought that we had was that, well, let's think about, because the government 2030 plus is a consultation for the next 30 years. For the next 30 years, let's think about, do we still need a container terminal right in the middle of our city? If we don't need a terminal, let's not have a terminal. If we need a terminal, let's think about where is a better place for them. Because in the middle of the city, there's a large piece of land that is close to the city, very good for city life. And that's about 1,000 hectares. Because it's not just about the container port, it's also about all the containers, the open storage that you need. And as you said, a lot of them contributed to the brownfield problems in new territories. Do we still need to have that container terminal right there in the middle of our city? Singapore chose to actually reclaim in a far away part of their city, reclaim land, and move their container terminal there, which is more modern, because 70% of our volume in the container terminal is for transshipment, meaning that they actually don't need to be shipped up to the north. They just need to be put from the small boat to the big boat, assembly, and go away. So is our facility best to do that now? We need to discuss that. And that's where I will leave it to more chat. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for that very detailed presentation. I think there were a lot of stats and facts in there that many of us probably weren't aware of when it comes to the Hong Kong housing market. Maybe if I can kick off the Q&A by asking you a question. It struck me one of your dominant themes was the need for reclamation. What exactly is the obstacle there? Why is it not happening? And is it a lack of political will? Is it environmental concerns? Is it a lack of resources?
To be honest, anything that anyone propose, anyone can find 10 different opposing reasons. If you don't think about the big numbers, the 9,000 that we're proposing, you just think about that one area, even either here, either in Twin Moon, either in Zhangguan or even in Sokuwan, we thought we can move the prison there. Any of these sites, you would have 10, 20 different reasons to argue against environment and fishing demands, and we have spoken to a lot of the stakeholders. We respect their views. But on the other hand, what we thought is that we lack of a long-term coherent debate about actually what is the big number that we're talking about here. And I think a lot of us just focus on the micro picture, which is important, but we're sidetracked to the bigger needs that we have. Obviously, when we actually decided to have a collective view, so actually have a bit of a more bigger scale development, we still need to debate the micro issues. But I think we are too early to bog down on the micro issues without looking at the big pictures. And then what we thought we should do, though, is just talk about the big picture first.
But at the so focus on the fundamentals rather than the technicals, right? But
Yeah.
at the same time, there's no sign that debate is really getting traction yet. It doesn't sound like that conversation is happening in Hong Kong. I mean, you mentioned moving the terminal, the port for terminals, but realistically, is that going to happen, do you think, over the next
Well,
few years?
since our report published in April, we do see a bit more local debates. For example, in magazines and in professional bodies, the former head of Architect Association in Hong Kong talks about, based on our idea, he has other ideas which we welcome to have. Any ideas is better than have no ideas. Right now we have no ideas, no flats, nothing. So we were welcoming any ideas. So they have their own ideas. We thought it interesting. And RICS, another professional group, also have another ideas on the container port terminal. So we thought these are debates that we need to have, and I'm glad to see that since our report came out, there's a bit more discussion about that.
Okay, we'll go to the audience soon, but Florence, do you want to?
Thank you. Florence de Changer with Le Monde and the French National Radio. Two questions, if I may. First, can you remind us the proportion of land that is owned by the two or let's say 5 largest real estate owners, and how does that play in the picture of high prices? And then the other one is, how do you reconcile the narrative of Hong Kong is lacking space with the fact that only 25% is developed?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's unfortunate that is the society doesn't have the willpower to actually think a bit more. As you said, we don't, it's not about the land, it's about the willpower to have a bit more developed land. So developable lands is the key. We only have 25% developable lands, and the society has decided against any large-scale, developed land. As I said, 40% is country park. We don't need to actually touch that. You have 25% that's developed, so you still have 35% sitting there doing nothing. It's neither country park nor developed areas. And why?
Yeah.
And obviously that's unfortunate. But that's a discussion I think we need to have in the society, which is not happening.
But why do you concentrate on reclamation then?
Well, I think this is one focus, is one suggestion that we have, because we are asking ourselves, okay, the government says 5,000, which is sort of the lowest hanging fruit that they can have, in the new territories, and we're asking ourselves, so that's not enough. Let's think about other ways. How can we make that 4,000? So this is one way to do it. We welcome other thoughts, to be honest. And to answer your first question, though, the top developers have a total of 1,000 hectares of farmland. Number one, 1,000 hectares is, if you think we are right, that we need 9,000 for 30 years. So that 1,000 is enough for 5 years. It's not that much. Number one. Number two, part of those lands are already, incorporated in the new towns that they were planning anyway. So that will be used. For example, in Hong Shui Q, for example, in New Territories North, those will be used. Number three, But in order to be effectively utilizing those lands, you need to have a bit more aggressive planning so that the plot ratio can be higher, so that the sewages, the roads can be fixed. But right now, the plan is just too small. I think that's sort of we just have no plan. Either we have no plan, we are using an old plan. By the way, the Hong Shui Q New Towns was an old plan that was shelved in the late 90s. They take it out again. So they are either no plan or recycling plan. And what we're saying that we need more than just recycling plan. We need to have like new plan. Otherwise, we are not. We're going to stuck here for a long time. And in fact, my argument would be that we have not seen the worst in terms of supply and demand imbalance. I'm not sure about the prices, but we have not seen the worst in terms of supply and demand imbalance.
Maybe hold that thought. We'll see if there's any questions from the floor to begin with. We have one over there, please. Thank you.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks
Hi.
very much. Basically an observation. From what you were saying just now, it seems like you're saying reclamation is the only low-hanging fruit in policy terms. But reclamation, whatever the environmental arguments, pro and con, still has a timetable. So in Singapore, when they reclaim land, it takes 5, 10 years for the land to settle. Typically, they use landfill, including rubbish, it's not while it may look like a low-hanging fruit from the perspective of just expanding the amount of land available, in practical terms, I question that. Secondly, your comments on political will are right on target. And it's not only the container port, it's not only the quite substantial amount of brownfield, which is being used for used cars, containers, rubbish, everything, all sorts of purposes other than the original intent of farmland. But there's also the large amount of built infrastructure that's zoned as industrial space when Hong Kong has lost its manufacturing base. I've always I'm sorry, I'll stop, but I've always fantasized myself about renting a loft or buying a loft someplace in Hong Kong's old industrial zones. But it just doesn't happen. There's a little bit of an incremental industrial space that's been converted, but then you have the land premium question, and the government gets stuck on that. So it's really a question of policy and will. And I think if you need to kind of reset some of your recommendations to focus on that.
Thank you. Let me just talk about I don't think the reclamation is a low-hanging fruit per se. In fact, there's no hanging fruit. I think my message today is a message of alarm, a sense of urgency, a desperate cry for more actions. I don't think there's low-hanging fruit. In fact, as I said, the Hong Shui Q was originally planned in the late 90s. So by the time it was completed, it takes 30 years. So in terms of developing new developable land, 30 years, decades, is what we're talking about. So regardless of whether you do reclamation or developing new towns, decades is the time frame. So we're not talking about next 5 years. Next 5 years, I'm very concerned. But we're talking about if we don't have this long-term view, because land development takes decades, we got to be, as you said, get our act together as a society. In terms of reclamation, in Tai Po, Bak Shek, where the science park is, the first stone was put in the sea in 1996, and the first employee got in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. So, that's not a bad timetable. Can we repeat that always? No, but I think it's also a question of political will, just a general societal consensus. And in terms of the industrial buildings, I think that if you, I think I spent a lot of time just just walking around Guntong industrial buildings, and a lot of my friends are involved, and it's packed. Don't have this sense of feeling that is vacant out there. Nothing in Hong Kong is vacant. Legally or illegally or in a gray area is occupied. And that's where it's the last safe haven in Hong Kong where you can still pay $10 per square feet and do things in Hong Kong. Where do you can find a place where you can pay $10 rent per square feet and have a shelter over you? Nowhere, but legally, illegally, or in gray area in industrial building. And that's why all the art studios, that's why all the performances that cannot pay high rent are stuck in there. So we have no vacancy anywhere, and that's the problem in Hong Kong. And so to talk about, let's just use some of these industrial buildings and convert them for living. You're taking away, valuable spaces for some of these people that are actually doing a lot of interesting activities in the industrial buildings. I think the problem is the problem in Hong Kong is not the distribution of land. The problem in Hong Kong is that we just don't have a big enough pie of land that we can use. So I think that's
Okay. Any further questions from the floor there? Okay, we'll start in the corner. Thank you.
Yeah, Lynn Grebstad. Everyone's talking at the moment about sort of the bay, the development of the sort of the Pearl River Delta, and the fact that it increased, vastly improved transportation networks, etc., developing the whole area, integrating the whole area. Is there no sort of great master plan for Hong Kong to work with China to try and avoid having to reclaim land to increase housing areas?
Well, look, we don't know how is it going to play out because obviously the mainland Hong Kong we have different sort of we have immigration, different law, so legal system. And in fact, the biggest thing is obviously the hospital, healthcare, and social care system. Not a lot of people are willing to, especially old people, right, that have a lot of sort of chronic disease and elderly care. They don't obviously want to, move away from the healthcare system in Hong Kong. So, if the Bay Area was successful, you actually cannot eliminate the possibility that not only people are not moving out, people are maybe coming in. So, where is that net going to come out? I don't know. There might be two-way flow, yes, and how it's going to come out, I don't know. And to rely on the Bay Area and just stuff people in there is not the solution because obviously, even the, look at Macau and Huangqin, I think that model is not going to be repeated because everywhere land is a scarce commodity.
Okay, next question at the end, please.
Thanks. I was just sort of curious when you said Hong Kong society decided to stop developing new land. What you meant by society is that the government, is that real estate developers? The real estate developers are influential in government. Why would they not want to develop?
Well, with all due respect, I think if you just read all the newspaper in 2006, is there anyone calling to build more new lands? Anyone? Anyone? I don't think so. If you find one news article or op-eds that people comment on, hey, in 2006 or 2005, let's not stop building new lands. No one is saying that. So let's, I think just blaming the government is, we can do that. But I think the blame is on everyone, to be honest. Why do we not have that foresight?
Okay, any final questions from the floor? Getting close on time. No, well, maybe I'll ask the last one to you then. You mentioned that. Oh, sorry. Do we have one? Oh, sorry, Juliana. Sorry.
Juliana Liu with BBC News. The title of the talk is Hong Kong property prices. What goes up, must come down. I'm paraphrasing.
Question mark.
Question mark. Okay. So this proposal, I'm guessing it's just one, reclamation. Would you see it actually bringing down property prices? Do you have a model for how much prices will come down by?
No, as I said, prices is a, it's so complicated. If you just not think about housing price, think about the stock price. There's so many theories of, efficient market or behavioral finance. Is that sort of a psychological bull run, and is that sort of usually the pendulum swing overswing, all these sort of arguments. So prices is not something that, to be honest, I would claim a crystal ball. It's something that Warren Buffett said he has no clue about the stock price. He only know that he's going to buy when it's cheap. So obviously, the housing price is not cheap right now, and we are obviously our credit cycle is closer to the top than the bottom, and and the price has to do a lot more with also with capital flow, inflow, QEs, and what Yellen said. How's the U.S. dollar index, right? The dollar index softened a little bit these days, and so last time in 2015, we had a little bit slight drop in the property prices in Hong Kong by about 13%, where the central line index dropped from 142 to 128. And that was coinciding with what? Not with demand and supply, but with the US dollar strengthening. So I'm not claiming that I know exactly what correlated the housing price, but obviously capital flow, US dollar index, all these have a lot to do with it as well. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that you do this, you will solve the pricing problem. I'm saying that think about what is worse. Right now, the price is high, we don't have enough land. I'm asking myself, if were to have a credit bubble that sort of bursts, not in Hong Kong, we're talking about globally. Let's say the price dropped by half. Let's just play a mental exercise. And we still don't have enough space to live. Now, that's where you have unemployment going up, the price is cheap, but no one said, a lot of people don't have a job, but we don't still have enough spaces to live. Which one is worse? I'm guessing that this one is worse. So I'm not saying that, we're trying to solve to have a low prices will be a solution, because when the low price happen, that's usually coincide with a pretty big event globally. That will be bad, because not only we will get hit by the global economic trouble, which means unemployment going up, which also, even though we have a low property price, but we still don't have enough space. What sort of world we are living in then? I mean, it's pretty scary, I think. So it's not just about it.
Just a final question, Stephen, if you could briefly expand on the point you made earlier that the worst might still be ahead. What do you mean by that?
Sorry?
That there might be still worse ahead in terms of...
Oh, what I mean is that if you look at the private houses, private flats, a lot of the supply are done by rezoning. Now, the rezoning is hard because there's social costs. Because what it means is that you're turning something that is not meant to live into a living space, and people are opposed to it. It has high social costs. So the low-hanging fruit for rezoning is done. So what is left is going to be very difficult. And if we don't have the new town that actually come on board in time, then the supply situation will become worse. And as I said, the public housing, that's on the private side, but on the public housing side, same situation, because we're relying on a lot of these new towns to come in place to supply what is already undersupplied. We're short 30%. What I'm saying is that the shortage of 30% public housing is not the worst case scenario.
Okay, well on that note, hopefully this session today will contribute to the public debate on Hong Kong's housing market. Let's have one final piece of ceremony to do. It's to give you a gift from the FCC. So thank you. Please thank the co-op.